Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Turn to Genesis 10. Last week we went through the genealogies of Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. While going through it, I mentioned to you that there were two names that I wanted us to revisit at another time. Out of all of those genealogies, at least focus, or at least come back and spend time on two of them. One of them was the name Nimrod, who first shows up in verse 8. And we're given information about him in verse 8, verse 9, and in verse 10. The other name I said that we'd need to come back and revisit is a guy named Peleg. And he's mentioned in verse 25, an unusual comment made about him where it says, in his day was the earth divided. So we'll examine that a little bit at another date. This morning, we're going to focus on the man named Nimrod. Just who is Nimrod? Before we read the three verses that are dedicated to Nimrod, I want to show you something I find very peculiar in chapter 10 leading up to the introduction of Nimrod. Let's look in verse 1. Verse 1 starts off fine. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood. So that's okay, but then in verse 2 it begins to list the sons of Japheth. How many sons are listed in verse 2 as the sons of Japheth? 7. Very good. It says it, doesn't it? These are the sons of Japheth. And then it mentions 7 of them. Then we're going to be given a list of the descendants of 2 of those 7 sons. Verse 3 lists the sons of one of Japheth's sons, Gomer. It lists the sons of Gomer. How many sons of Gomer are listed in verse 3? 3. Very good. Again, it says it. These are the sons of Gomer. Then in verse 4 is a list of the sons of Javan. How many sons of Javan are listed? 4. All right. Again, it says these are the sons of Javan. Verse 5 then tells us that this list of Japheth's 7 sons and 7 grandsons, making a total of 14 individuals in all, that this list of Japheth's descendants were the origin for all of the Goy in the earth, or the Gentiles. All of the Gentile nations spring forth from these 14 names. Genesis 10:5. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, and in their nations. Now look at verse 6. And the sons of Ham. And it lists 4 sons of Ham. Then in verse 7 we read, and the sons of Cush. And the sons of Cush, and it lists how many sons? In verse 7, how many sons of Cush? There you go. 5. Then the last part of verse 7, it says, and the sons of Reamah. And it lists 2 sons. Now I want you to take those verses, particularly verse 7, and I want you to contrast it with verse 8. Verse 7 says, and the sons of Cush. And it lists 5 sons of Cush. It plainly tells us how many sons Cush had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But verse 8 says, and Cush begat Nimrod. Do you see that? Yep. So why wasn't Nimrod listed up in verse 7 as one of the sons of Cush? Cush had 7 sons in verse 7. Then it switches and talks about Reamah and his sons. Then it goes back to Cush and adds a footnote. And it doesn't say, and oh yeah, by the way, Cush had another son, and that other son's name was Nimrod. It says, and. Cush had 7 sons, and he begat Nimrod. I think this is our first clue that Nimrod is not an ordinary guy. He's not listed among the sons of Cush. He is listed in the lineage of Cush, but not listed as a son of Cush. It's a very important statement that he's not listed as a son of Cush, but listed in the lineage of Cush. I'm not saying that every time you see the word beget, that it is some kind of a flag, but I am saying that when one verse lists all of his sons, and then the next verse doesn't call the guy they're talking about his son, but just simply says he begat him, we ought to take notice of the changing in the verbiage. Especially, again, because it does not identify Nimrod as a son of Cush, but it does say he's in the lineage of Cush. If we take notice of that, then it'll help us better interpret the other verses that are going to talk about him. So let's read those other verses with that in mind. Verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before Yahweh. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahweh. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. So we were given a clue by how he is introduced that we're not to diminish this man or categorize this man in the same way we do the other sons of Cush. We're given a clue, pull him out and think about him differently. Then notice the very next thing we're told about him. He began to be. Look this word began up. The word, you would think, well, I know what began means. But if you look this word began up, the definition of that word does not include began in the general sense. When a Hebrew dictionary defines this word, kalal, it says that this word means to wound, to dissolve, to profane, to bore, as in to bore a hole into something, to break, as in to break your word. So think about that. Wound, dissolve, profane, bore, break. Now, if you read far enough into the definition of this word, it will eventually tell you that it can mean to begin, but it means to begin as if you are driving a wedge into something and forcing it open. I looked up several places where the word is used in the Bible, and here's the conclusion that I came to. This word means to exert great force against a thing or against a person or persons, or to exert great force for a thing or for a person or persons. So it is a releasing of mighty power for the purpose of accomplishing something. Great force is the key ingredient contained in this word. Well, what great force is associated with Nimrod? Where is he exerting great force? It says that it is in being a mighty one in the earth. That word translated mighty one is Gabor, the Hebrew word Gabor. Let's go back to Genesis 6 to get an understanding of how this word can be used. Verse 4. Isn't it interesting how much of the Bible refers back to Genesis 6? Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became Gibors, mighty men, which were of old men of renown. The word translated giants is Nephilim. Sons of God, the Ben Ha-Elohim, are the angels who, Jude tells us, left their first estate. The Ben Ha-Elohim came in unto the daughters of men and bare children. So what does that tell you about the children that were born? Are they human? No, thank you. They're hybrids. Part human, part Ben Ha-Elohim, part angel. This combination made them Nephilim. Nephilim were tyrannical, bloodthirsty giants of old. They were Gabors. They were mighty men. Gabor is almost in every case a reference to someone who has supernatural power or who has great abilities because of supernatural assistance. Genesis 6:4 is a reference to giants who possessed great stature, who had supernatural knowledge, who had supernatural strength, which would easily explain the many monolithic marvels around the world that you can find today. Genesis 10 tells us that there is a return of these beings, and one of them is found in a man named Nimrod. He is not listed as a son of Cush, but he is listed in the lineage of Cush. And in light of the fact that verse 7 of Genesis 10 lists the sons of Cush, and in light of the fact that verse 8 says that Cush begat Nimrod, it is not a stretch at all to assume then that Cush's wife or one of his wives made the same horrific mistake that the daughters of men made in Genesis 6:4. Do you understand that? In light of what verse 7 tells us about the sons of Cush, and in light of the fact that it simply says Cush begat Nimrod, it is easy to see that Cush's wife made the same mistake talked about in Genesis 6:4. It is not a stretch to say that Cush's wife gave birth to a hybrid son by the name of Nimrod. Verse 8 tells us this when it says that Nimrod exerted great force and was a mighty one in the earth. He had great powers, great stature, and his life exhibited things that were supernatural. Keep that in mind. Let's read what else we're told about him. Verse 9. He was a mighty hunter before Yahweh, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahweh. Why would the Bible tell us about a man that was good at hunting? Unless it's using code. I mean, in the whole scheme of things, do you really think it matters that this man was skilled at hunting? The Bible is not talking to us about a man who was an outdoorsman who hunted deer, elk, rabbit, bear, whatever. That's not what it's doing. Think about it this way. What do hunters do?
Kill.
They what?
Kill things.
They kill things. Hunters are predators who go out in search of prey. They choose their prey of choice. Some prey of choice are white-tailed deer. Some are elk. Some are moose. Some are birds. Some are bears. Hunters become predators who search out different kinds of prey. And then men will arm themselves with the weapons suited for the prey that they are in pursuit of, for the purpose of taking it out. Whether they're killing it for sport, killing it for food, or killing it for a trophy. Their purpose is to seek it out, find it, and kill it. That's the ultimate goal. Now behind it might be I'll eat it, or I'll have a picture taken with it, or I'll mount it on my wall, but the purpose is to kill that particular animal. Nimrod is not a hunter of game such as elk or moose or lions or bears. It says Nimrod was a hunter before Yahweh. Again, I encourage you to just go look some of these words up. The word before is a Hebrew word for face. It's translated before, but it is the Hebrew word for your face. It can and often does imply to stand against someone. You've heard the phrase, "Get out of my face," right? Don't get in my face, right? It can and often does imply a stance of anger against someone. Nimrod, according to Scripture and according to historical records of him, was not a normal human being. He was a supernatural, mighty one in the face of Yahweh. What do hunters do? They seek prey to kill. Nimrod, we're being told, is making it his goal and his purpose to eliminate Yahweh and the worship of Yahweh. We talk about how he went about doing that and how successful he has been in a moment. But first, let's talk about his kingdom and those that are associated with him. Let's read verse 10. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Babel, as I told you last week, can mean the anointed one of Baal or the anointed one of El, Elohim, a god, or it can mean gateway to the gods. Babel, the gateway to the gods. And Erech and Akkad and Calneh and the land of Shinar. And out of that land, out of the land of Shinar, went forth Asshur and built Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Calah and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city. Pay attention to the two main names there. Babel, it's the same word translated as Babylon throughout the Bible, which was in the land of Shinar, and out of that land went Asshur. So pay attention to the word Babel and the word Asshur, and Asshur built Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria. Asshur is the founder of the Assyrians. So out of Nimrod's land, Nimrod is known as Nimrod of Assyria. Not only of Babel, but of Assyria too. So you've got Babel or Babylon, and you've got Assyria, Nineveh and the Assyrians. What do you know biblically about those two nations, Babylon and Assyria? Anything of significance pop in your mind? In 722 BC, Assyria will overthrow the 10 tribes known as Israel and scatter them across the face of the earth, dislodge them from their territory. 722, Assyria does that. In 587, I believe it is, Babylon comes down and overthrows Judah, destroys Jerusalem, and destroys the temple. 587. We're told in Genesis 10 that Nimrod is a mighty hunter in the face of Yahweh, whose goal is to destroy Yahweh and the worship of Yahweh. Sometimes you and I have a hard time planning out our day. That's not the way spiritual beings work. They can plan things out hundreds of years in advance. Nimrod's goal was to set in motion a working that would eliminate Yahweh. And you find his kingdoms of Babylon and Assyria overthrowing Yahweh's people in 722 and in 587. Who is Nimrod? Pardon me. He's a hybrid mighty one who made it his life's goal to get in the face of Yahweh and eliminate him, to take him out for sport, to take him out as a trophy. Here's the third thing we need to know about Nimrod and his kingdom. Nimrod created a false religion to carry out this purpose. He easily drew in the Gentiles. Easily drew in the Gentiles. And eventually was able to seduce Israel and Judah into his debauchery that led to their overthrow. Oh, pardon me. Every false religion on the planet, and this is not debatable, every false religion on the planet and every pagan ritual associated with fertility and with the worship of the sun and the moon, every one of them trace back to Babylon and to Nimrod. Every one of them. Nimrod, it is said, boy, I got a little itch there, sorry. Nimrod, it is said, died. Well, why would he die? Well, he was not a god, even though he claimed to be. He's a hybrid, but he's not a god. But when he died, it was told, I'm going to get that out in a second. When he died, it was told that he was reborn as the sun. Thus, sun worship. He came to be known as Baal. It is said that he had a wife by the name of Semiramis. That is debatable, but it is said that he had a wife named Semiramis. I don't know if she was his wife or not. But Semiramis said that she was impregnated by the rays of the sun. And she gave birth to a child who was the reincarnation of Nimrod. And anybody know what this son's name was?
Tammuz.
Very good. Tammuz. Tammuz, anybody know when he was born?
December 25th.
He was born December 25th. He celebrated with Yule logs and evergreen trees and the giving of gifts. Semiramis then, because Nimrod wasn't just, because Tammuz wasn't just her son, but was actually the rebirth of Nimrod, thought it okay to marry him. Tammuz also was killed. Legend says by a wild boar, torn into pieces. Semiramis gathered all the pieces but could not find certain parts of him. And so she, in his honor, began to create obelisks to put in places of worship as a symbol to represent that. She demanded that every spring before the day of his death and resurrection, he will be resurrected, she demanded that every spring there be 40 days of mourning for him. Still observed in the days of Ezekiel. Yahweh brings Ezekiel to the temple and says, notice these ladies here weeping for Tammuz. Coming out of the Babylonian captivity, they adopted this practice of 40 days of mourning. Still observed today, and we know it is what? Lent. That is correct. She claimed that he was resurrected from the dead, and in celebration of his resurrection, she demanded that a pig be eaten on the day of his resurrection. Ever wonder where the Easter ham came from? That's where. Now, this I will readily admit. There are a lot of conflicting stories out there about Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. But here's what cannot be denied by anybody who will be honest and look at it. The Bible plainly tells us that Nimrod is unusual. He was a mighty one who possessed supernatural power, who exerted great force against Yahweh and everything associated with Yahweh. The Bible plainly tells us that it was his intent to hunt Yahweh and to annihilate and eliminate the worship of him. And the Bible and history make it clear that from Babylon came forth false religions that worship the sun, and that particularly worship a sun god who was born on December the 25th, whose birth is celebrated with evergreens, Yule logs, and mistletoe, and are all associated with the Babylonian worship of Nimrod. The Bible and history make it clear that from Babylon came forth the cult of Ashtoreth or Ishtar, a fertility deity who is worshipped by rabbits that lay eggs and eggs that are dyed, and by celebrating the resurrection of the sun god on a Sunday by sunrise services, dyeing eggs and hiding them in the earth. The Bible and history make it clear that from Babylon came Baal, who was and is called the Lord of heaven. Lord is not our Elohim's name. Baal means Lord. Our Elohim has a name, and it's not Lord. What is his name? Oh, magnify Yahweh with me. Let us exalt his name together. The Bible and history make it clear that from Babylon came forth the concept of the mother of God. Semiramis was the mother of God, who is to be worshipped along with the other Elohims of heaven. And the Bible makes it clear that when Nimrod set out to establish, or what Nimrod set out to establish in Babylon, that Yahweh rejected it, confused the languages, and scattered the people. And we'll talk about that more when we get into Genesis 11. The Bible makes it clear that Nimrod is not through, that his spirit is still at work in the earth. Being a hybrid, his spirit had nowhere to go and therefore roams the earth. And it makes him the son of Satan, working as a demon spirit even to this day. And the Bible makes it clear that Nimrod is the foreshadowing of the antichrist, who will come in the last days. For the kingdom that the antichrist will rule over is the kingdom of Babylon. Well, what does all of that mean? It means that to participate in unbiblical aspects, pagan aspects of worship, is to join forces with Nimrod. There is no denying that Christmas and Easter and these activities associated with them trace back to Nimrod. We know who Nimrod is, and to participate in them is to join forces with Nimrod, not with Yahweh. When we close our minds and our hearts and refuse to see the blatant evil that is associated with those events, we're helping Nimrod be a mighty hunter in the face of Yahweh. Yahweh said plainly of a seventh day, this is a sign between me and you. Nimrod also has a sign. Yahweh said plainly that these are my feasts. And he explains them and demonstrates them in great detail. Nimrod also has his feast. So Yahweh says, this is my day. Nimrod said, this is my day. Yahweh said, these are my feasts. Nimrod says, these are my feasts. Nimrod is a rebel whose spirit will become the spirit of the Antichrist. Think about that, the Antichrist. And then think about what we're told about Nimrod. He's a hunter. How do hunters work? What do hunters do? You know, a turkey hunter, will put out an anti-turkey in a field? He'll set a decoy out there that looks enough like a real turkey to draw the turkeys in so he can kill them. A duck hunter puts an anti-duck in the field. It's a decoy that looks enough like the duck to deceive the ducks and get them to fly in and land in a pond so they can be killed. A deer hunter sometimes will use decoy scents. Scents that would draw a deer in, and a deer hunter will also mask his own scent so you're not aware that he's in the woods so that he can kill a deer. That's why Nimrod's called a mighty hunter. He uses decoys that look real. His Christ, his Messiah, was born on December the 25th. He demands that that be celebrated with Yule logs, evergreen tree, mistletoes, and gifts. His Christ was resurrected, and that resurrection is celebrated with bunnies, candy, dyed eggs, egg hunts on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. Nimrod uses decoy scents of love and acceptance to lure people in while he masks his own scent, and that scent is an utter hatred for Yahweh, for Torah, for Yeshua, and everything Yahweh stands for. Either we worship the Elohim of Torah and the true Messiah foreshadowed in the feast, or we are deceived into following the ways of Nimrod, the mighty hunter in the face of Yahweh. The wrath that is poured out in the book of Revelation is greatly against the city of Babylon. Turn to Revelation, we're going to close there. Think about that. A city that existed almost 4,000 years ago is said to face judgment in a future day in the book of Revelation. Revelation 14:6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear Yahweh, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. Worship Him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Fornication is the mixture of the pure truth of Torah with other pagan practices. The call of the angel is for all mankind to fear Yahweh. In other words, the cry of this angel is, do not stay trapped in pagan practices because you fear your family, or you fear your neighbors, or you fear your co-workers. Fear Yahweh and get out of Babylon. Give glory to Him, the angel said. Give Him your praise. Give Him your worship. You are not worshiping Him with eggs and bunnies. You're not worshiping Him with Santa. You're not worshiping Him with Ishtar's basket or sunrise services. Worship Yahweh and Him alone. Give Him glory. The word worship there means to fall prostrate before Him in adoration. Humble yourself before Him. Return to Him. Flee Nimrod. Notice it mentions the everlasting gospel in verse 6. The everlasting gospel is explained in verse 7, 8, and 9. Well, all we got to do is preach the gospel. I agree. But verse 7, 8, and 9 explain what the everlasting gospel is. The everlasting gospel is a cry for people to deliver themselves from the chains of Babylon and to return to the true worship of Yahweh. That's the gospel. Get out of Babylon, return to Torah, return to Yahweh, worship Him and Him alone. Look in Revelation 17. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, come here. I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters. Why is she called that? Because she's worshiping demons instead of Yahweh. Her love and her devotion is attached to that which Yahweh hates and to that which hates Yahweh. Verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. We read these things sometimes and don't stop to think about what they're telling us. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Do drunk people have good judgment or bad judgment? Is that up for debate? They have bad judgment. Most bad decisions, well, you can, what is it they say? You know a bad decision is going to follow these words, here, hold my beer, right? People get drunk, they do crazy things. Hey, y'all watch this. People get drunk, they do crazy things. And so what verse 2 is telling us is, there are a lot of people who will tell you they know that the Messiah wasn't born on December the 25th. And they know that evergreens and mistletoe and Santa have nothing to do with the Messiah. But they continue to participate in those things because the wine of her fornication tastes so good. And they've become drunk. Generation after generation continues to drink until they cannot or will not see the error of their way. What does Santa look like? The character they call Santa, what does he look like?
Short man with a white beard.
Big white beard. You know who they have depicted him to look like? The images we know of Nimrod. Do you know that Nimrod had a flying carriage? Drunk with the wine of her fornication. The inhabitants of the earth will tell you that they know that the resurrection of the Messiah has nothing to do with bunnies and eggs and baskets and hunts and sunrise services, but they continue to do them because the wine of the fornication of Babylon tastes so good. And they become drunk with it and are no longer able to make good judgments. Verse 3. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Everything associated with her is blasphemy. Why are you always throwing off on Christmas and Easter? Because it's the thing that Nimrod used to deceive the masses. Verse 4. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, decked with gold, precious stones, pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. The gold cup looks good on the outside, but inside it's full of filthiness and abominations. But what verse 4 is telling us is that this false way is very lucrative. The many walk in it because there's gold to be had. Upon her forehead was written a name, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Do you see? What Nimrod started greatly infested the inhabitants of the world, so much so that it's got to be dealt with in the end of days in the book of Revelation. Infested by Nimrod's religions. And when Yahweh's judgment falls, it will ultimately hold Babylon and Nimrod responsible for introducing this type of demonic activity into the world. One more, we'll go to Revelation 18, and we'll close here. And after these things, verse 1, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Babylon fell. But the demons and foul spirits and the unclean things that were associated with Babylon still cover the earth. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Why do they call Black Friday Black Friday? Say again?
Great deals.
Black Friday is called Black Friday because that's when the merchants of the world find out whether they're going to make a profit that year or not. That's when they sell their Christmas merchandise. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 4 is explaining to you the hold that Babylon has on the whole world. Christmas and Easter are big days for merchants. But not just for the merchants, but also for the preachers. Why won't preachers tell you the truth about these things? Because they make comfortable livings lying to you, that's why. Or they're afraid of not being able to make a living if they tell you the truth. I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. Come out of her. Well, I want to stay and see if I can help other people see the truth. That's not what Yahweh said. He said, get out! Verse 10, staying afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is your judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise any more. When the false religions of Babylon go down, the merchants will weep, for they made billions off of these lies. Verse 18, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea, by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, you heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for Yahweh has avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard no more at all in thee. All of the great music that comes forth out of there will be made silent. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Those who follow the ways of Nimrod love everybody unless they teach Torah. Let me say that again. You'd rather not. Those who follow the ways of Nimrod preach love and acceptance and tolerance of everybody, except those who teach Torah. And somehow or the other, they despise those and accuse them of being instruments of Satan. Who is Nimrod? He's the illegitimate son of Cush who acted with violence against the inhabitants of the earth. He was a mighty one, a hybrid, endued with supernatural power. He hated Yahweh, made it his life pursuit to eliminate any and all worship of him. The message of Genesis 10 and Genesis 11 as we get into it will be, do not follow Nimrod. Do not listen to him. Stay true to Yahweh. Stand up. I get kind of wound up when I see these things. I understand that. I don't always mean, I don't always mean to get loud, but I do. But I love you. It just frustrates me that I was in church all my life and nobody ever told me these things. I graduated from Samford University with a degree in religion. Nobody dared to mention these things because most of the system is set up to ensure the continuation of the religious practices of Nimrod, not set up to direct people to pursue truth. Straight is the gate, narrow is the way that leads to life. Few find it. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. As his name is put upon you, so shall he bless you.